It's not like I'm the mayor or anything. I'm just running this stupid little Zoom. Um, all right. There's people. There are eager, eager library folk in the waiting room. So, Cole, do you want to tell them your bit now, or I also, my other thing is like I want to keep talking so that people who are just signing in know that their sound is working.
Ah, check, check, check. Gotcha.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
we can keep up the chatter like ESPN hosts.
Yeah.
How about that, Kate?
I
Um,
so sports ball was great.
it happened. Um, I will mention, for the sake of tech check and also people who might be waiting to start, you still have time to get coffee. And if you didn't have a chance to either print out or make available on the screen of your choice the materials that went out in advance, there are no slides happening during this session. All the content you will be taking away is in the handouts that went out, and it will be very helpful for you to have those in front of you in some way. So you still have time to queue them up on a second screen or print them out or some combination. So there, I'll
Cool.
mention.
Thanks. And I did I guess this whole thing started recording without the Zoom lady doesn't say it anymore. That's what I guess Caitlin, that's what you were saying. Like there was no recording in progress, but I just looked and it's recording. So either we'll keep this in or Jen and Caitlin, if you want to do editing magic on the back end, it's up to you. We could decide later if our banter is worthy of going up on YouTube.
I'm gonna miss the recording in progress voice.
Yeah.
That's not happening anymore. I haven't heard her in a while, I guess.
Well, if anybody says anything really like that they don't want in the recording, you could just start singing a Beatles song and then we'll get taken off right quick.
We'll get DMCA'd. Yeah.
Yeah.
This,
Yes, and everyone, if you don't have the materials handy, the link for the materials is in the chat. Nathan just dropped it in there.
yes, and we're going to be talking about several links, and the presentation team is going to be dropping those links into the chat as I refer to them as well. And of course, you are welcome to put your own helpful links in there and to just engage with your community on this topic.
And I think that should answer the question from Claire and Claudia about if you didn't get the email because you registered after the email. That's the same link that's being dropped there.
Yep. It's an implementation guide, a list of links for today, and the template policy that we'll be reviewing.
We will be doing questions during the presentation. It would make my life easier if you put them in the Q&A pile instead of in the chat pile, because that might start moving a lot faster than I can read. So I appreciate it.
And I'll just add the team, sometimes you might put a question in, it won't get answered, and that's because the team knows it's going to get addressed as we move along. But definitely, especially if I accidentally drop a legalism that needs a little bit more exposition, please call me on that and just say, need more information, stop talking in Latin. Let's do, although I know many of you probably know Latin, but definitely please ask that.
I only know lorem ipsum. And I did see one thing that's almost buried in the chat is Laura just let us know that the recording and process line is spoken when they enter the waiting room. So we, the panelists, did not get to hear it. You, the attendees, had the pleasure.
Do we want to get started?
It's
Think
10
we're
o'clock.
ready? Okay. All right, everyone. I hope you can hear me all right. If you can't, please send us a message. But welcome to today's session. We are starting the ultimate AI policy for your public, academic, museum, etc. library. This is presented by the Empire State Library Network. My name is Jen Northup. I'm the Member Engagement Services Coordinator at WinyLark. Today's webinar is scheduled to last until 11:30 and it will be recorded. Thank you to everyone who submitted information in the Padlet in advance. It was very helpful in structuring today's session. All who registered should have received the program materials via email, but again, they're being shared in the chat. Please keep an eye out for it. This includes a template policy and an implementation guide, and you will need them throughout today's session. If you have any technical difficulties during the presentation, please let us know in the chat. If you have any questions for Cole, again, submit them in the Q&A located at the bottom of the screen. There are automated captions available. If you're not seeing them, please let us know. All attendees are expected to follow our code of conduct, which will also be added to the chat. But to summarize, please treat all staff, attendees, and speakers today with respect. Those not adhering to the code will be removed. So getting into the good stuff. Our presenter today is Stephanie Cole Adams, whose law office provides ESLN's Ask the Lawyer service. When Cole first started practicing law in 2001, she focused on intellectual property and internet law. Among other qualifications, she has served as a member of InfraGard, the private industry FBI computer security initiative. And so now a word about you all. We have over 500 attendees from pretty much every type of library in the state of New York. And the goal of today's session is to review a template policy that Cole has provided that positions your unique library to confidently use and advise those you serve on the use of AI. And because no one knows the challenges related to this better than actual librarians, the ESLN and Cole both want your input as we go. So this is how today will work. Each of you were sent a template guide or a template policy and an implementation checklist. If you haven't gotten them yet, please find links to them in the chat. Cole will be referring to them throughout the entire webinar. Please keep them handy. There will not be any slides, so you will want to be taking notes and working as you go. The presentation team here will be watching for your questions in the Zoom Q&A. Please try to use that space instead of the chat, and they will interrupt Cole at the right time. If you ask a question and you don't hear an answer, it may be because they know an answer is coming. We'll also have time for questions at the end. And then after the session formally concludes at 11:30, we'll reserve an additional 15 minutes, which will end at 11:45 for anyone to ask a sensitive question that you might not want captured in the recording. That's it from me. Let's turn it over to Cole. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Before I jump in, I do feel compelled to just say that today might be a very difficult day for a lot of people for different reasons. This seminar is about AI. This webinar is about AI. We're going to focus on that, but of course it's weird to have weirdness and not at least mention it. I'm going to acknowledge that and move on and wish everyone peace. So this is an ambitiously titled webinar, The Ultimate AI Policy for Your Insert Here Library. And what I want to say at the beginning and then make sure we return to the end is working with AI is all about actually human beings. And that is what the template policy, the guidance that we're going to be reviewing today that informs the policy, and the implementation guide, that is really what it all distills to. So I just right here at the beginning, anyone who's worried about your job being replaced by AI, we're going to talk about some specific protections that are out there with respect to that concern. But really, in preparing for this, when I pitched this, I thought AI is a reason, if anything, more people need more librarians, right? And more places where they can go for reliable information and stewardship of information management. And having gone through and done this work, I am now even more convinced of that. And hopefully you will feel that reassurance at the end as well. This is also a really great chance because we have so many of you from so many different library sectors in the state of New York and a little bit beyond, I think, for you to share information and network on this. And I encourage you to use the chat for that. There was a lot of that happening in the Padlet. This conversation really needs to keep going and will probably evolve as quickly as AI is evolving as well. So with that, we're going to start. One of the questions that we got, and I really enjoyed the candor that were in the pre questions that were submitted by the Padlet, is just, what is AI, right? What is it? And I was talking to someone yesterday about how AI is now being maybe oversold, right? Every company with a product that's online is feeling some sort of compulsion to say, like, now with AI. And we joked that AI is the new low carb diet, right? It's just, it's on trend. That said, AI is real. And one of the reasons it's real for me as an attorney is it has a legal definition. Your link, there's a link to the New York State definition of AI, and it's from our newyorkstate.gov Senate site. So we'll pop that link into the chat. And you ready? No slides. Little handheld things here. We're going to go over this. For purposes of the law in New York, artificial intelligence shall mean a machine-based system that can, for a given set of human-defined objectives, make predictions, recommendations, or decisions influencing real or virtual environments that, when used, may deeply impact the public, right? That deep impact on the public factor is why the state of New York, and as we'll discuss in a little bit, the federal government, felt compelled to define AI as a legal concept and then issue legislation controlling its use, putting up some guardrails. The approach of the state of New York versus the approach of the federal government, there's some difference there. We are going to talk about that a little bit. But what we're really going to focus on is in the context of the regulatory environment, both worldwide, federally, state. How are each of your institutions interacting with AI that meets this definition, right? So that's the definition. We also have a shorter one, which is used by the federal government. The link to that is from the National Institute of Security and Technology, which is an engineered or machine-based system that can, for a given set of objectives, generate outputs such as predictions, recommendations, or decisions influencing real or virtual environments. AI systems are designed to operate with varying levels of autonomy. So what's interesting is that definition drops out the directly impact the public, but certainly the standards we're going to talk about at the federal level also talk about impact on the public and the environment. We are going to talk about environmental factors as part of this analysis as well, which is particularly important for libraries who, well, for all libraries, but also libraries that have made certain sustainability commitments. We will be talking about that. So before we jump into more law, I want to refer you to what's called Moloch's 4 rules. So the link to a cartoon about that is going to go in the chat. You can follow that. But it is Moloch's 4 rules for co-intelligence. AI is often called co-intelligence. In other words, we bring the human intelligence, right? And we have created as humans a co-intelligence. And I have found these rules a handy distillation. We are going to go through some more particular and very intricate ways to assess AI, which will be in your policies if you choose to adopt this type of template policy we're going to be reviewing. But I have actually found these 4 rules from Moloch to be very, very handy. So, ready? You can say it with me, right? Always invite AI to the table. So one thing I have found, and I'm seeing this, I spend a lot of time, as you probably can imagine, with other lawyers. And there are, pick your horror story about AI. There are several that involve attorneys, some of whom have used untrustworthy AI to generate legal briefs that, as it turns out, not only were not good, but had manufactured cases in them, which of course led to sanctions for the attorneys who did that. Shame, right? Shame. So many attorneys I know and many people I know in different industries have simply said, no AI, no AI, no, right? No AI, just none, right? At this point, if you have one of these, that's an impossible boundary to set up, either in business or in personal life or in a library. AI is happening. What was the quote from last week, right? The robots are here, something like that, right? Yeah, AI is a thing. It's been here a while, right? And so one thing to just remember is, the first rule of Moloch, right? Always invite AI to the table because it's going to be there anyway. It's going to be sitting on the table no matter what. You might as well invite it. And that means you are moving from a position of assuming that it's there and you are using it. So that's the first of Moloch's rules. The next one is my favorite. It's my favorite because it plays into the theme I talked about, which is that AI starts and ends with people, with humans, right? Be the human in the loop. AI is a tool for people to use. We are going to talk about the different types of uses and how to assess if your institution is going to make use of a particular AI product for a particular purpose. But always, always, always is this rule of a human is in the loop when it comes to using AI. So that is a handy rule. The next one, I'm iffy on this one, but it's a rule, and I guess it does make sense, and you'll see why, right? Treat the AI like a person. Treat the AI like a person, but tell it what kind of person it is. And this talks about, you get the AI you demand. AI is driven by human input. We will be returning to that. And this is also a handy one. This plays into risk management. Always assume that the AI you're using is the worst AI you will ever use.
Paul,
Yes.
we have a couple of questions actually. Maria Cervoni says, so much of the hype is about generative AI, for example, ChatGPT, which is the new kid on the block. But AI is such a much bigger world than that. Which are we talking about here?
When it comes to the template policy we're going to be reviewing, we are actually talking about every type. So I just read a great article talking about it. The New York Times had put out, what are people using AI for? And people are using AI from everything to touching up their photos. So sort of like, Photoshop Plus, right? Excuse me, to tea time. To analyzing medical data, to actually there's a botanical outfit right now that is using AI to analyze the shine and texture on botanical samples they have so that they can build a database and better analyze the botanical samples. So there's generative AI, there's analytical AI. The policy, as we get into it, actually defines a few of these things. But really what we are talking about is the big one, right? This policy that we're going to review is really to assess the use of particular AI products that meet these definitions, and that really is all of it. A system that can make predictions and it can learn, right? That learning may happen. The end product may be generative. It may simply be analytical. Actually, another great use of AI that I learned about is a computer system that is hooked up to water mains that are operating and is being used to measure for leaks in the water mains and is able to pull, right? It's able to do that calculation because it's pulling not just from the data of the flow, but environmental conditions, water pressure at certain places and all this, doing an immense amount of calculation that would otherwise be, and learning as it goes, right? That's the other piece, is that the AI has the ability to adapt. Again, it's only as good as the input it's given. That's a theme we're going to keep coming back to. But we are talking about everything. Did that answer that one?
Hearing no comments to the contrary. Someone did say that AI generated manufactured scientific papers are also a real issue. And AI manufactured citations or sources and research papers as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there is a reason for the ambitious title of this webinar, right? The ultimate AI policy, because the policy and this approach that we're going to review is not about setting up rules like, we don't use AI to compose emails or something like that, right? This is about analyzing what AI might be used and for what, rather than issuing blanket prohibitions, right? So that gets back to Malek's rule, right? Always invite the AI to the table. Now, you may invite the AI to the table and then say, but we're not using you for this specific thing. But always assume that it's there waiting to be used. So we've gone through Malek's rules. And if you have other rules, this is truly where this is just a fantastic opportunity. If there are other rules and guidelines and guardrails that for those of you who are already using AI, and we know from the Padlet that a lot of you are making really great, creative, and positive and responsible uses of AI. For those of you who have those chops and that experience, and you have other rules or things that you found helpful, feed that into the chat, right? This is a chance to collect that information. So great, I just talked about all the wonderful things that AI can do, but now we're gonna pop a link into again, NIST. You're gonna keep hearing me talk about NIST, that National Institute, but there's a caution, and I think we've already heard some hints of it in the questions that we're getting. And certainly people mentioned it in the Padlet and in the pre-questions we got. The risks posed by AI systems are in many ways unique. AI systems, for example, may be trained on data that can change over time. So water flow data, right? Sometimes significantly and unexpectedly, climate change, affecting system functionality and trustworthiness in ways that are hard to understand. AI systems and the context in which they are deployed are frequently complex, right? Because AI is enabling not only pulling from a broad data set, but also applying analysis of that based on human-defined parameters, right? So the AI has been told, pull from these data sets and look for the following things and then do this, right? Making it difficult to detect and respond to failures when they occur. AI systems are inherently socio-technical in nature, meaning they are influenced by societal dynamics and human behavior. And there is nothing more erratic than human behavior sometimes, right? Give me a good computer program that isn't trained to change based on the input of variable data, and I know I'm going to get the same binary answer every time, right? In a certain way, you can trust classic machine technology. AI is different, and it's different for the very same reason why it's also can be so useful and valuable, because it really is an extension of humanity and human ingenuity. And if you think that means I think that the AI glass is half full, no, and I don't think the glass is half empty either. I just know how big the glass is, right? We just know what we're dealing with here. So those are the risks. Because of these risks, the US adopted a law to get a handle on things as well. So we have a law in New York, and then we also have laws at the federal level. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but certainly the impact of the law has been somewhat changed by executive order, because as we know, there have been some presidential orders, particularly pertaining to AI, and particularly, with the goal of making sure that caution isn't disturbing innovation when it comes to AI. So this, again, is why it is so important for every institution that is making use of AI to perform their own analysis in-house. And not as hard as you might think. So we're going to get to that. So as part of the legislation, the National Institute of Standards and Technology got involved. And so, I can just find right? So here we have this PR piece from the NIST, right? I'll keep talking about NIST. And NIST is a national institute, independent, as national institutes are supposed to be. And this is how they describe themselves, right, on the page that the link is provided to. From nanoscale devices that power the most advanced microchips to earthquake-resistant skyscrapers, NIST measurements and research fuel innovation and improve the quality of life for all Americans. sign me up, right? My improved quality of life as an American. So NIST, in all seriousness, did issue a series of guidance and standards for using AI. And so the link, what that is, the policy, oh yeah, so the policy we are reviewing today is based on the framework that has been developed by NIST. And that link is going in the chat now. That is link number 7. And I'm not going to read the whole guide to you. What I've done is broken down what this guide provides as a path for assessing the use of AI for particular things, and put that into the policy. So taking a extensive document and distilling it into what can you do at the procedural level to move forward and use AI with confidence. And if you are looking at the guide on page 12, and don't worry, I've got some more things for you. NIST, remember Malick's 4 rules, right? So NIST came up with their own rules of what does it mean to use trustworthy AI, right? In other words, can the AI be used? And they came up with, there's a table on page 12 of the link, but I'm going to go through it. And then we're going to talk about what these things mean. That's a lot of the work we're doing today. So in order for AI to be used for a particular thing, whether it is generating a report, analyzing data, helping a library patron on a particular thing, maybe they need to generate a resume, any of those uses. For the particular use that the AI is going to be put to, it must be, and this is all in your materials, you don't need to write this down unless you like to learn that way, safe. And they do provide, right? Okay, what does safe mean? We're going to get into that. They provide how do you evaluate it if it is safe. The AI must be secure and resilient. I would like to be secure and resilient, right? Must be secure and resilient. We're going to break down what does that mean. This is really important. The AI must be explainable and its results interpretable. It can't just be this magic black box that people think is just going to do stuff, right? It is a human tool that needs to be understood. And many people, either because they've kept up with AI or maybe they have, recently been learning about it in school or through continuing ed, many people have that competency to make sure that the AI they are using is explainable and interpretable. It must be privacy enhanced. The AI that is being used must be suited to the privacy of whatever the privacy standards of whatever is happening. And of course, at libraries here in the state of New York, where not only is there an ethical duty, but a legal duty to preserve the confidentiality of library records, assessing AI products to ensure they are privacy enhanced, very important. We're going to talk about how to do that. So I'm not a believer in telling people to do things without telling them how. And that is what the policy is about. We're getting there. We're getting there. They must be fair with harmful bias managed, right? Anybody who is going to be using AI for recruitment purposes, for interviewing, all these things, anything related to employment or serving the public, making sure that the AI that the product has been assessed for, well, what bias could this have based on the data sets it was fed to operate as AI, and how are we counteracting any harmful bias that would come from that? Making sure it is accountable and transparent and valid and reliable. Those are the standards that we are looking for when using any particular AI product for any particular function. And it's really important to realize that an AI product that might be really, really good for simply checking grammar might not be so good for writing your community report, right? If you're a public library, one of the things you're doing is you are submitting an annual report to the community. Might be really good to run that report through an AI to check it for grammar, maybe even for formatting. But maybe not to compose it. Or on the flip side, maybe your library decides, you know what? Maybe we aren't casting a broad enough net. Maybe we want AI to actually do an inventory of all the things we've done out there and what people are saying, because maybe it would, if we programmed it right, it would catch these things. But then, where is the human in the loop is going to look at what that AI found and then generate the final version. And something that may have taken 20 hours of labor at a library that is very often understaffed and everybody's working at the impossible 110%, has been able to do that task, right? But still at the end, we'll have a human product with a human who's responsible for the final composition. We're also going to spend a little time talking about the copyright implications of the process I just described, right? Where AI is an essential component in gathering information and maybe even in preparing what might be part of a final product that is intellectual property. And how do you use AI in a way that makes sure that at the end of the day, your institution owns the copyright to what was generated? And we are going to spend some time on that, although that is a topic we could talk about for the whole day and none of this other stuff. So we're not going to go too far down that road, but we do have a link to guidance on that.
If I may, Cole,
Yes,
we
please.
have an interesting question. There's a specific one that's hanging. If it's yours, we'll get to it. But this one says, a lot of the policy guidelines leave it to individual state agencies to develop their own policies. My concern is that without consistency, we run into contradictory policies and applications. For example, many universities say they do not have an institutional policy, and to maintain academic freedom, they leave it to individual faculty to develop their own AI policies for their courses. Doesn't this also mean that the institution's policy is to defer the responsibility to deal with AI issues to individual instructors? This could lead to a student getting an A while using AI in one section, while another student fails because they used AI in another section. Both would be valid even if they are the same exact course.
So we did just get a question along these lines to Ask the Lawyer, which is coming out, which talks about AI and academic integrity issues. So there will be more coming on that. So this policy here doesn't quite put the onus on. There's a lot to unpack in there, but I'm just going to talk about how does a big institution have an AI policy, especially when they need to respect academic freedom, and especially when, for many faculty members, teaching competency of how AI impacts a particular academic field, right? So someone teaching biology needs to know about AI. Someone teaching creative writing needs to know AI about AI. They're going to be handling the implications of AI for their academic, for their fields of study very, very differently, right? So they do need to have the ability to do that. Every course needs to have a syllabus, right? So the kind of clarity about when AI is used and how it can be used in the context of the student experience should be laid out with crystal clarity in a syllabus. And for those of you who have lived through an academic integrity matter, you know that a lot of times it comes down to what was the guidance in the syllabus about how a particular assignment was to be completed, especially with group work, things like that. Yeah. So within that framework, so again, you might have a biology faculty member who is saying you will use AI in the following ways, right? Versus the creative writing faculty member who may say you will never use AI or use AI for a prompt, right? There's no rules there. The overall institutional policy should be requiring that the use of the AI that is within the autonomy of the faculty member, right, is still responsible. In other words, they are not simply saying to every student, you will put ChatGPT on your phone, right? Which if there was a blanket requirement, if one of my children came home and said, yeah, we have to put ChatGPT on our phone, I would be going, you have to, as a condition of this class, I have concerns. Just concerns. I would need to look into it further, but that would, right, that would get my radar going. So that is what, again, this policy is hopefully doing, is providing the resources. You know, one of the bottom lines is if people are using AI or requiring others to use AI and they can't show that they have determined that the AI is trustworthy for that purpose, they should not be using it, which isn't to say they shouldn't use AI. It's just they should follow some basic rules and make sure it is trustworthy. And as we will talk about, that has to be periodically reevaluated because, as the risk discussion we just went into talked about, AI changes just like humans change. So that was a lot. Hopefully everybody hung in there with me. Anything else on that, Kirsten?
Yeah, well, we have a comment that meeting the NIST criteria of transparency and validity seems like an impossibility since there's no transparency about the LLM training data and no real understanding of what happens in the black box process.
Well, actually, so that is a great comment. And so I would say, so just recently I took a look at an AI product to see, okay, could I use this to, I'm a block club leader, right? Could I use this for my block club? Would I feel good about that? And because some of you may have seen that one of the major AI companies just settled with the Authors Guild and some other copyright holders for $1.5 billion of copyright infringement because of the data that they pulled to fire up their learning language models, right? And so I was just like, I'm not good. You know, I'm not using products where I feel that extreme copyright infringement was just a cost of doing business. That is my personal, I don't feel that that reflects well on me, right? My own personal values for my either my volunteer life or my business life. So I would say actually it's not impossible. I would say when something is impossible, when you don't have the assurances that the product you're thinking about meets your institutional or personal guidelines for ethics and transparency, it is not trustworthy. End of story, right? And you know, now does the fact that some companies are owning up to their serial copyright infringement and paying off the authors now, does that make things okay? I don't know. I haven't gotten there in my own personal analysis, but that is exactly what the exercise we're going to be looking at does. And just remembering there are many, many, many AI products out there, not just the big ones that we hear about in the news. And some of them are, you know, only suited for very limited purposes. And you may go through the analysis and deem them trustworthy, right? Or not, you know, that's part of the exercise. Anything else on that?
Nope, I'm still hanging on to the other one.
Okay. So the NIST framework we're going to look at is also coordinated with the International Standards, ISO, International Standards Organization. We have a link to their the ISO commentary on artificial intelligence with respect to risk management, right? And ISO says the potential benefits and risks of AI are formidable for society as well as companies. Standards that enhance transparency, data quality, and system reliability are a way to mitigate risks and maximize rewards. Incorporating desired societal and ethical outcomes based on comprehensive stakeholder inputs, they can help bridge gaps in regulation. And that relates to the question we had just a bit ago, right? If it seems like a lot of this is being left to individual state agencies and there are gaps in regulation, this is why it is imperative for institutions, especially institutions that everyday people are looking to for integrity of information. This is why it's so important for every institution to have some type of policy for assessing. I got another one for this. Trustworthiness. I have never said the word trustworthiness so much in my life as I have in the last 3 weeks. It is very important. And again, that's not to say there should just be a blanket prohibition on use of AI. It requires, just like, frankly, the internet or even books themselves, right? It requires careful, skilled handling. And I think one of the reasons I've become so passionate on this issue is because libraries and information management specialists, uh, this is something that your superpowers are uniquely suited to. I have great respect for colleagues I've had who work in IT, but the job of people who work in IT is to get information technology going and to always make it better and more secure. Where the rubber meets the road on ethics and information management, that's where the librarians are, right? And so it is imperative that libraries have these competencies, even if that means acknowledging, well, 99% of the AI out there, we are not in a position to assess if it's trustworthy. We're not using it, but we are going to use a particular product, to help with certain things, right? That is what the policy and implementation guide are designed to help a library do. I'm going to move on to, so we do have a link, it's number 9 in your list of links, regarding use of AI to generate institutional records. This is important, especially for any municipal entities out there, right? Our town, village libraries, et cetera. Because what you generate is not only foilable, but also governed by the New York State arts law that requires your public records be kept in a certain way, right? And for a certain duration under the LGS1 document schedule. It would be good for you to own the copyright to those things. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but there's some really, the Copyright Office has issued some very helpful 2025 guidance, and the link to that is here. We can certainly tease that out a little bit more if anyone has questions. But now it is time to pull out the
Actually,
guide and template policy, except for there's another question. Go for it.
actually, here's the question I've been hanging on to.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on libraries using AI for images, particularly with the ethical considerations of AI training on artists' work without the artist's consent?
I do have thoughts on this. So, number one, right? We just talked about how a lot of AI products have, it's out there now, right? Have committed copyright infringement in order to train their AI. And of course, there's also this notion of like, we want to celebrate and elevate human creativity. We got a lot of questions about that. And of course, you celebrate and elevate human creativity by asking human beings to be creative and then showcasing their work. I would also say, and I'll invite I would be happy to get pushback, but I have a feeling many of you, probably most of you now, have gotten what sounds like personal outreach, and it was written by AI. And maybe you've even gotten personal outreach from someone you know very well. I always say that writing styles are like fingerprints, right? They're very unique. Certainly lawyers have a certain fuddy-duddy way of writing and use whereas too much. And, and there are certain patterns based on professions and all sorts of things. But a person's writing style is often very unique. And once they start to use AI, that is being lost. And I think that can really interfere. I try, and I'm going to leave aside people who use AI because as a disability accommodation, right? So I'm about to say something very judgy, and I want to be very clear that people who are using AI for disability accommodation, that is a different topic. We are going to talk about that because it's important to make space and be very conscientious about that as an accessibility option for people. When an institution or a person is communicating in a way that seems insincere, whether they don't seem sincere, or they generated something by AI, and especially AI art has this kind of shiny look to it. There's probably other adjectives. I'm going to go with like sort of a shiny, smooth thing. And things don't quite look like where they're supposed to be, right? They're still in that uncanny valley, if you want to call it that. I think that's not a legal risk, and maybe it's not even an ethical thing. I think it's a public relations risk. It's never been more important for libraries, education institutions, cultural institutions to maintain positive relations with their public. And I mean like real relationships, human relationships coming together. And so anything that can drive a wedge in that, personally, I think is a risk. So again, there's a difference, and this comes back to, what I'm looking for, right? Be the human in the loop. Not letting AI become an interface that undermines your relationships, your credibility, and your obvious commitment to ethics, right? Which, again, a lot of people have very strong feelings because of the way some of the AI is trained. I actually think, and you'll see it, you're going to see it in the policy, that there's a time and place to disclose when AI actually was used. Sort of modeling that your institution and lampshading that your institution has the competency to use AI when it is going to be efficient, and in the public interest. And if you're a taxpayer supported institution, the idea that you saved, 20 hours. I guess we can talk about the electrical bill. That's another piece. We are going to get to that. There's a time to maybe say this was generated with the help of, and that's in the policy as an option for an institution to consider. Good. I'll sip tea for a second. All right.
Someone suggested the word you were looking for is authenticity.
Yeah, well, yeah, it does just seem inauthentic, right? It has that shiny look of inauthentic. Yes, yes. I'm a fan of authenticity. There we go. All right, so now the guide and the policy. Now I am going to say this. I'm going to say this up front and ask you to hang in there with me. So I was going over this with Sarah Halstead, a medical librarian at Southeastern Library Resources Council, who just gave me this great quote, and I got permission to use it. I had asked her to take a look at the policy that is now before you, and I'll read this out. But this was her first response: existential sigh. Right? She just looked at this and said, it will take a lot of effort to answer these questions thoroughly. How much more human energy and attention will AI consume before I see a demonstrable ROI, return on investment, that offsets the destruction of the planet? Sarah, right? That's it. She got it. She nailed it. And hopefully the policy will actually help, because I think we got to a place where the policy actually was helpful in some of the analyses that she was doing. So with that, if you can look at the first page of the implementation guide. So when I draft a policy that is intended to be a template for an institution to conform to its own use, obviously we have to think about the variables that will change from place to place. And I do like to provide a guide for the leadership that has to think about this. Many of our attendees today are governed by volunteer boards of trustees. Your boards will run the gamut. You will have people on your boards who are AI experts. Some of them maybe even AI investors, right? And then some of you will have boards who are just like, oh, I heard that's evil, let's just not use it. And there's going to be everything in between. So this guide puts it out there. Why is it important for an institution to consider having an AI policy? And it stresses that this is a customizable guide, right? And a customizable policy. So if you take a look at the second paragraph in the guide, and again, this is for if you are a library director, or someone who is tasked with taking a look at this issue for your institution, this is something for you to be able to bring to your governing board and say, this is the work we need you as the fiduciaries who set policy for this institution. This is the work we need you to do. They don't need to be AI experts. They do need to realize that some type of policy that includes risk management needs to be in place. And the final product that your institution ends up with may look very different from the template, but this is all intended to start a conversation and make sure that a board simply doesn't say, which I see fairly often, we'll let the director worry about that. That's their responsibility. Yes, it is their responsibility to monitor the day-to-day operations of the institution, and that includes whether or not AI is being used. But a governing board is the body that sets policy. And this starts with policy. And because of the risks involved, and that includes not only the risks of not using AI properly, but also failing to use AI properly, failing to have the competencies that your community is going to need from your information management professionals. Some of this is even going to relate to budget, because you want to make sure you have enough budget to train people on these things. This is to help let your board know you are responsible for policy. You are not responsible for showing up at the library and asking us what we're doing with AI every day, right? That's too much. They need to set policy, and then the director and the management team leads. So if we take a look at the second paragraph on the implementation guide, AI is a big topic, and the use of AI creates big risks. At the same time, libraries and cultural institutions must be able to assist the public in using AI that is trustworthy to the extent that your mission requires you to be able to do that. Next paragraph, that is what this policy template is for. Rather than create a blanket policy on the use of AI, as in, don't do it, do it, this policy template allows libraries to use existing and evolving frameworks to manage the risks that AI can pose. This positions institutions to be on the cutting edge. And it doesn't require that you always be on the cutting edge, but it positions you to do so. And then next paragraph, to set this out in human terms, the guide uses an FAQ format to take your institution's leadership through the phases of implementing the template policy. This will vary from institution to institution, but the fundamentals are the same. Knowing why you would use AI, considering the risks and benefits, and then making sure it is done in a sustainable way, both from an environmental and from a operational perspective. And we're just going to spend a little more time on this first page here in the guide. And we already talked about this a little bit, but this is, again, all of this is out there for you to use in the way you see fit, right? These are template materials, and they are licensed to all ESLN, any member of a regional library council can use these and modify them as needed. But this number one question, why should a library or cultural institution have a policy regarding use of AI? There are two reasons. First, libraries and cultural institutions are trusted sources of information. Failure to competently and confidently use AI is not consistent with this status. Again, the use of AI is going to change depending on if you're a library at a big research university or a local public library, right? That scope is going to change, but AI is there. And so facing that head on is part of the purpose here. Second, use of AI can bring great benefits, but also poses great risks. Having a policy helps manage the risks while cultivating the benefits. And so the next question, and this is what I think people struggle with in this area, right? Does the policy say what to use AI for? And the answer is no. This policy creates a process for institutions to assess AI tools based on how they will be used. It is so you are going to be looking at a specific product for a specific use. And one last thing I want to say, just so that we get it out there, does this policy bar use of AI to replace employees? And right now it says no. Although for institutions that must follow civil service law, that is illegal. And I provide the citation. So for those of you who are civil service, the state of New York recently passed a law making it illegal to replace you with AI. The policy that is here is a little more nuanced than that. This policy is based on the idea that employees may need to work with trustworthy AI as part of their routine duties. In other words, again, not replacing people, because we always need to keep the human in the loop, but is there a value added to AI? We're going to pause the implementation guide there to dive into the policy, but I'll just sip some tea and see if there are any questions. All right, we're good. All right, so now if you can have the template policy in front of you, yellow means it's a variable that is going to get changed depending on your institution's information. So number one, number one simply says, why do we have a policy? It is well established that untrustworthy AI poses risks to individuals, institutions, governments, and society. We're putting the risk right out there in the policy itself. and then saying this policy is to manage those risks. That's why we have a policy, is to acknowledge the risks and to be able to assess the risks and make good decisions in the moment when it comes to AI. Now, section 2, I have added some definitions. These definitions are pulled from the NIST guidance and also from the NIST guidance. This can be, again, these are template materials. So if your institution has a particular standard it wants to refer to, this template is actually designed for you to be able to put the standards and even the definitions from your preferred source. I defaulted to NIST, right? There are others, and you can certainly take a look. And if those of you have a favorite set of go-tos, if you share that information with your colleagues, either in the chats, people put some things in the Padlet, that is fine. The point is to have a credible, tested system for assessing the risks of particular AI tools for particular uses. So moving on to page 2, we have the scope of the policy. Now, again, depending on your institution, you may be able to narrow this scope. You may want to broaden it. But as written, this template addresses AI from the perspective of procurement, the decision to buy the product. And we are going to talk about, many of you very appropriately pointed out that sometimes AI is bundled into things that you're buying already, right? I got this note from a provider I use, now with AI. And I was just like, and your bill didn't go up. And I was like, I don't want this, right? I write my own legal memos. I do my own legal research. I don't want your AI. I need that in my brain, right? I don't want this. And then I turned it off, right? Boop, click, turn it off. So procurement, sustainability, the operations of your governing board, the operations of your director, the operations of all your other personnel. Accessibility issues. It's really important. I said we're going to spend time on that. It's very important to bear in mind that what might be an inappropriate use of AI in one context is appropriate in another, and especially with respect to disability. Grants, sponsored programs, and donations, right? Including if a donation comes with a requirement that you will use AI, or government dollars with a requirement that you will use AI. Generation of institutional records, public relations, assisting members of the public with library utilization as impacted by AI. Most public libraries are required to have an internet policy. And of course, your library computers where people are using the internet might be where your patrons are accessing AI. And they may ask your team on the floor, is this a reliable thing for me? What's a good tool for a particular thing? How do you make sure that the input you're giving them is based on trustworthy AI? And all other uses. I'm going to pause for 1 second just to see if there's anything on that.
Oh, we've got some questions and comments.
I saw the chat going. I don't look at the chat because it derails me, but I saw. All right, what do we got?
Well, oh, my scroll is scrolling too quickly. Damn. Computers making our lives better every day. We do have a comment that Ethan Mollick is not somebody that he'd base AI policy on. He's a little too enthusiastic for widespread AI adoption for his taste.
No, absolutely. And just to be clear, wait, I do want to actually be clear on this. So I like Mollick's 4 rules as a distillation of the cautions. But we are going through the NIST criteria, which, as pointed out, Existential Psi are a little bit denser and certainly not as glass half full as Mollick. So yeah, absolutely. Understood.
Yeah, we had a comment that I am very concerned about treat AI like a person, that guideline in Mollick's 4 rules section of the links. AI is a program, not a person, and treating AI tools like they are real people has led to a number of prominent cases in the news of psychosis episodes.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I think that is why we're going to be talking about this, right? Because what purpose is being made? of the AI. Absolutely. Absolutely.
We have Philip Brandon dropped a link for the ALA's guidance uh, on AI competencies. So that is an interesting link. And an interesting recent article by Magnus and Buscella and De Cruz. Chatbot apologies. I'm not going to read the entire title. But yes, we've had some commentary.
Good. Good. Yes.
We also had a question from Sarah Taylor. She says she's a digital skills trainer and she has discussed the use of AI with her patrons. Almost everything is discussed in a general manner, but she worries, has she accidentally exposed the library to liability by doing that? She doesn't have an AI policy that she's aware of.
So when it comes to issues of, then Sarah, thank you for trusting us with that question. This is really important. So when it comes to AI and liability, that's really going to come down on the particular product. One of the things that's very clearly established in the law is that librarians do not have liability. Although people have tried to challenge it lately in some other contexts that we're not talking about today. But anyway, librarians do not have liability for the content that they connect people to. I think more broadly, what's important is that because the public is looking to the public needs good guidance on this topic. And one of the places where people should be looking to, have traditionally looked to, and we want to make sure they are looking to in the future and recognizing the value in that, is they are looking to their public libraries for media literacy, right? And it used to be, is this a good website to go to, right? Why should I just not believe what Wikipedia says, right? When is it good to go to the Wikipedia, right? What is a primary source? All these things. You take those skills that people have always looked to librarians and information management professionals and academics to have, and now it's one step more, which is, and it's something that a lot of the comments and questions that have come in have already showed you were all thinking deeply about, is this particular tool, is it suitable? Is it trustworthy for this particular task? Is it something I want to use? And the risk with AI, if the source of the training that went into the particular product, if the source of the data is unclear, it might not be trustworthy for a particular task, which is slightly different than, is the company that founded the AI, did it do so using ethical and legal practices, right? A little bit different. You could have reliable data that's derived from unethical sources, right? But so I wouldn't worry about anything in the past where you said, oh, sure, ChatGPT can definitely generate a resume, right? That's not so much the issue. But it is saying, what is a good product for a particular use, and knowing why you are confident in that recommendation or in steering people to another product that might be a little bit more customized for their particular use. And thinking about what device are they even going to put it on, right? That data security piece, the privacy enhancement piece, and being picky. But also there's a difference between simply refusing to use AI as a categorical thing and having really solid rational reasons to not invite the AI to the table, to not treat it like a human. So, all right, I'm going to dive into AI and procurement unless there's anything else we need to address. Question.
We had one question. Is using AI for archival description, for example, helping with metadata, any different from AI in public libraries like reference work? Thinking theoretically, like, do the same rules apply for both, or are there different considerations?
Oh, so this is where I'm going to model the fine art of staying in one's lane. I am sure there are librarians on this that can answer that question a lot better than me. I would say when it comes to generating that type of data, personally, I would want some type of sign that when was AI used to generate this? How, or was there enough of a human in the loop that you can really trust the end result, right? How was the end result trustworthy, right? That to me would be the question, because I would be an end user. So for instance, if I use a legal database, I want to know that they're pulling their court opinions from the actual courts and not Wikipedia, right? I want to know sources, and I want to be able to trust. But I think as far as the difference from a professional perspective, I would say that is a great one to talk about with your colleagues. And these are the kinds of conversations that should be happening and be captured. Yeah, was that a really good, duck and weave? Yeah. Sometimes I just don't know. I'm going to talk about AI and procurement. So we're on page 2 of the template policy. So getting it out there. The institution purchases goods and services that may consist of or incorporate AI. As we talked about, that is probably true already for every one of your institutions. If it's not, you're probably an outlier, and that's really cool. And that maybe that would become a marketing point, right? The AI free library, we've guaranteed it, 100% AI free. No smartphones allowed on the premises, whatever. So for example, going back to the second paragraph in section 4 here on page 2, if the library purchases a smartphone for general use, the smartphone may have AI embedded in it as a default application or function. Remember, places are now just adding this stuff, assuming that you're going to really be happy about it. For another example, if the library licenses an e-resource, the e-resource or manner of accessing it may have an AI component. Procurement for products that may consist of or incorporate AI shall be evaluated, right? So in other words, the moment you're thinking, oh, we're going to license this product, does it have AI? Probably does. We're going to run that through the analysis that's coming up. And this is the part, again, looking at all of this, it sounds like a lot of effort, existential sum. But actually, it's not too bad, I think. But I value feedback, but just give it a shot. So this is where the analysis based on the NIST standards comes in, right? I'm not going to re-recite them, and this is where you can pick your institution can pick a different standard that is out there if you like. I went with NIST for the template. You can put in a different mode. Absolutely. The important thing is to have one that you trust will, at the end of the day, right, mean that your use of AI is going to be trustworthy. Moving on to page 3. Top of page 3. To ensure such considerations are raised early in the purchasing process, all requests for information. So some of you are from small institutions, and especially if you're at an association library that doesn't have to follow New York State procurement guidelines, your purchasing process may not be as regimented as is suggested by this policy. That's okay. You can change this template to suit how you buy things, right? For those of you at larger institutions, state institutions, government, quasi-governmental institutions, you should be following the New York State procurement rules. And so you'll have a procurement structure that this approach fits right into. And really, when you're doing a request for information, which is sort of just getting quotes, or an RFP, or if you're going to think about a sole source purchase, which means the product is so unique that you don't need to do a bidding process because there's only one provider of this particular product, you're going to take a look at that purchase under this policy. And then a copy of the evaluation will just be added to that procurement packet. So the same way you're showing, yep, we got 3 quotes, or we did an RFP and we announced it, we are also monitoring for AI risk factors, and we've made a decision, right? And we've made a decision that the reason we're purchasing this product and what we're going to use that AI for, or the AI can be turned off, right? If the AI can be turned off and you're not going to use it and you're buying the product anyway, that's it, right? As long as you have determined that it is secure, that's it. And then keeping a copy of the policy annexed to your procurement policy. So it just becomes part of the process. The same way for those of you who have to follow MWBE requirements for contracting, Maybe you have sustainability guidelines, another filter that your purchases go through. Maybe you even have social responsibility guidelines. This risk management guide framework just becomes another filter for your purchases. I make that sound so easy, but actually it's again, it's not too bad. All right, and I'm going to keep going, but if we do get questions, I'm going to get interrupted. So we'll plunge ahead. So item 5 on page 3, your board operations. Now remember, we talked about what is the responsibility of a governing board? To set policy. And also to make sure that the institution is, acting in accordance with its mission and is compliant with all appropriate laws and regulations. With respect to all policy developments and decision-making, the Board of Trustees shall evaluate all strategic plans, budgets, policies, and other governing documents to ensure that the institution's use of AI is following the policy. In particular, the board shall ensure the budget and strategic planning process do not contemplate using AI to substitute for the routine services, final judgment, or decision-making of paid employees. I'm just putting it out there, right? That a board committing frankly, I put this in here this way so that if you have a board member who's really, really in love with AI and thinks, yes, we can get rid of half the staff and replace them, I put this in there as part of an overall approach to guard against that, to keep the humans in the loop, right? So that's why it's in the suggested template in this way. Item 6, the director.
Someone asked, you mentioned sustainability, but there's no specific section on sustainability in the template, is there?
There is. It is on, hold on. It is actually in the, well, trustworthiness. Oh, it should be in the analysis sheet. Nathan, if you can point out where that was, because we did have it highlighted. Oh, yep, it's on page 7. Again, I know this is a lot. It's on page 7, right? So you'll see Schedule A. It is actually factor number 8, and it is highlighted because not everybody has sustainability targets, but we've put that in there as one of your variables, right? So, this policy, this is just the policy. We're going to get to the actual risk evaluation form in a moment. So, and mindful of time, I will plunge on. So again, just number 6 saying the director is responsible for overall compliance. That's standard regardless of what type of policy it is. And then this is something for your institution to consider. It is certainly not a legal requirement. It plays into the ethical and public relations components we discussed earlier in the presentation. So item 7, final paragraph on page 3, employees shall not submit written reports, emails, or other content generated by AI, right? Not edited, etc., without prior disclosure and consent of their supervisor. And the final result shall be reviewed by the employee for quality and substance. In other words, we've reached a point of sophistication here where using AI to pull together a report might actually be the responsible thing to do if you are using trustworthy AI to do that. It might actually be a responsible use of resources, but that doesn't mean it's replacing the human being. And again, many people who have kept up their competencies or maybe have just undergone a course of education and have been exposed to responsible use of artificial intelligence will be able to do this, and to tell them otherwise is counterproductive. So this is again, all of this is customizable. This is a suggestion, but at the same time, keeping everything human focused. Moving on to page 4 in the policy, we have a specific section on accessibility. This is a very evolving area, and it's really important that the policy, as you'll see, it drives decision makers to other resources, including not only NIST, but the Ask Jan site, which is a really great site. Nathan, if you can pop that in, askjan.org, that lists disabilities. It has a database of disabilities and typical accommodations, and AI is becoming one of those accommodations. For those of you who are taking a look at the copyright guide we provided a link to, there's a really interesting comment in that guide about using AI to generate the human voice? And when can a product that is the result of that still have sufficient authorship that it is actually copyrightable? So this all ties together. Number 9, grants, sponsored programs, donations. Sure, if maybe a donor says, I'm going to give you $1 million to create the AI library. Making sure that the specific requirements, the specific AI required follows, you go through the risk management analysis. That's, again, this is all about risk management. Generation of institutional records, we've talked about that. Public relations, same thing. And number 12 on page 5, assisting patrons. We talked about that a little bit. And then all other uses, right? I put the catch-all in. And the reason I'm moving along through this is because I do want to make sure we get to page 7. So if you can flip to that or scroll to that. So this is the actual risk evaluation form. So the policy is big because this really is intended, we didn't misrepresent. This is the ultimate AI policy. It's supposed to cover it's supposed to be a big funnel that the AI that your institution is considering using is poured into, regardless of what product it is. But here's the analysis. Here's the exercise. It's a simple form. And if you look at item number 1 under the preliminary information, what is the product? And I'm not going to name specific products. I don't want this to sound like a commercial or an anti-commercial. But, let's just say it's, ABC AI, right? How the product uses or incorporates AI. It's all AI, it's some AI, what does it do? How will the product be used? And if the answer by the institution is, I don't know, the analysis frankly stops right there. You don't need to go any further. If there's no known use for the product by your library. Now, if it will be part of the collection, that's a use, right? But if it's like, we don't know, then you don't need this thing. Anticipated users, leadership, employees, volunteers, the public, who's it going to be, right? Thinking about the audience. Now, for those of you who've been wading in these waters for a while, you know that some types of AI already have very deep risk management frameworks out there. ALA certainly has, as was said, has issued some guidelines. If there are standards that apply to this particular AI or the particular use, attach the standards, use them, right? That's an important thing to be aware of. And this is where you use your skills as information specialists, right? You're looking out there. And the ISO has some standards. We're going to talk about that in a minute. There's different, remember, AI is not a monolith. And so different AI is being evaluated by different places based on how it's going to be used. Ethics and privacy is number 6. Will the product have access to library user information? Remember, we talked about privacy enhanced. If you have a product that is going to integrate and work with other products on your network, and you don't know if the product will have access to patron information, right? You just can't know that, then that's not trustworthy. Right then and there, if you can't show, and this is where, diving into the contract and demanding assurances that the data will not be shared with third parties, because vendors love to sneak, the data will not be shared with third parties, comma, except for right? You don't want your data to be able to go to their subcontractors and all these other places unless it's disclosed to you and you consent to it, because that is how data leaks and then potentially gets incorporated into other things. So really taking a close look at the licenses, and there's a lot of guidance out there on this. I'm not going to dwell on it, but I imagine some of you are sharing some of those resources right now in the chat. So for those of you who know about that, pop those resources into the chat. Number 7, dependency. To what degree will critical operations depend on this? So I can't imagine an institution doing this, but let's say an institution decided that they would have an AI that completely oversaw their emergency response, right? If there was a blizzard and everything had to shut down, an AI is just going to take over and make the decision about closing the institution and send out all the information. You won't do that, but just to pick an extreme example, right? What could go wrong, right? That is a critical operation. right? And is there any redundancy? So that's an important thing to keep in mind. We have number 8, which is about sustainability. And again, AI is not a monolith. Yes, the computing power needed to power it is vast, but it does depend on the product. Poking around and taking a look at that. And again, there are resources out there for that, and you can find them. And then who's the person preparing this evaluation, right? It might not be the director, it might be someone else. Then we get into the actual risk analysis on page 8. These are the factors from NIST. So again, we're not using the Moloch factors, right? We're not factors. This is the National Institute's, the NIST framework for risk assessment of AI, right? And here is where you see not only the questions that I brought up, but also what do those factors mean? Is it valid and reliable is number 1, right? Is there objective evidence that the requirements for the specific use have been met? So there's a lot in the news right now that some places are using AI to interview job candidates. If that was something that your institution, I gotta say, there's something in my soul that just recoils at that, but nevertheless, it's a thing, right? We all have our own little boundaries and barriers on this. But if that is a use that's going to be made, is it valid and reliable? Is there objective evidence that the requirements you have for the product are going to be met, right? Is the AI safe? What are the risks, right? And in particular, NIST says, does the AI allow for shutdown, immediate notice, override, or other safety measures? And that would be especially if there was an automated process, maybe billing, right? If your institution is using AI to issue communications under certain circumstances, can you shut it down? Do you know how to shut it down? Does it turn off, right? Is the AI secure and resilient? How does it empower the user to address unauthorized access and use, right? Just like if it gets hijacked, what are the options? So is the AI accountable and transparent? And transparency reflects the extent to which information about the AI and its outputs is available. So this is that discussion we were having earlier about where the information comes from, and is the data set that's driving your particular AI product that you want to use. Because again, this is an analysis on a product by product basis. And so is this particular one going to be accountable and transparent for that use? Moving over to 5, is the AI explainable and interpretable? Can you articulate how it works? Do you understand, or is it just this magic thing? If it's a magic thing, it might not be for you. And by you, I mean your institution. Is it privacy enhanced? This is an incredibly important question for everybody, but particularly libraries, because you have an added ethical and legal duty to protect the privacy of your user records. This will require you to drill into the representations made in a proposal and the precise wording of a contract. Again, if that is not available to you, then you cannot reach that conclusion of trustworthy, and the product might not be for your library at that particular time. For those of you who are members of an academic consortium, the consortia that I have spoken with have been thinking about this for quite a while. And so there should be resources not only within your institution, but within the, if you're in higher ed, right? A lot of the academic consortia have been thinking about this and started to come up with resources for it, as have public libraries. So this is why it's so important for all 500 plus of you to be talking. You shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. This information should be out there. And just remember, the contracts that are coming in that govern the terms under which you're using a licensed AI product, they are always up for negotiation. Now, sometimes a vendor can say, no, we're not changing the terms of our contract. And you may have to make a decision as an institution, well, then we're not using your product. This is where staying in touch with your colleagues who are also using that product is so important. And Nathan, if you can pass if you can put the link to the guide that just came out on procurement and pushing back on licensing terms, that would be helpful. staying engaged with each other so you know when to hold the line on some of these things. Because of course, from the vendor side, they're going to try and get the most advantageous terms for themselves. And without appropriate and informed and timely pushback, they're going to do that, right? So this is the time to stay together and to stay organized on these factors, and have your own criteria, even if you don't use the NIST criteria. Number 7 is the AI fair with harmful bias managed. Again, this depends on what the AI is being used for. But thinking that through, there's a section on number 9 or 8, miscellaneous. Are there any other risks? Number 9, benefits. What beneficial functions of this AI merit the library taking the risk of using it, right? So maybe there's an AI that you have flagged some risks. Flagging risks doesn't mean you simply say, well, we're not going to use it. Flagging risks mean you say, is the cost benefit analysis, right? There's some risk. What is this section 9 says, well, what is the benefit? And then it's simply coming up with a plan to, okay, we're going to use the product, but we're going to mitigate the risk in the following ways. And one way is making sure that the people who are using the product have appropriate up-to-the-minute training. And this is where, ESLN put in the Padlet, is there more training, right? What training do people need to have? And people who are just coming out of library programs, this is the kind of thing that they are getting in school, sharing that information, talking it through, so that when you can identify those benefits and then make that decision. Number 10, what's the overall trustworthiness? And what decision is made, right? So going through those factors, is it, oh my goodness, we wouldn't touch this AI with a 10-foot pole? Is it, oh, okay, we're going to use this, but we're only going to use it for the following things, and possibly only the following people with the following training. We're going to put parameters. So what is the plan? That is what the end product is. And then if you take a look at number 3, this is where all that susses out. Does the above analysis show that the AI has been documented as sufficiently trustworthy for the purpose it is being acquired to fulfill? Has this analysis been submitted prior to the purchasing decision? Does the trustworthiness document support moving forward with the purchase? And if the purchase is denied due to this analysis, what aspects must be addressed prior to reconsideration? And this is where taking this information and talking with your colleagues so that you can work in coalition, right? To say, work with your maybe your cooperative library system, your regional library council, ESLN, to say, 20 of us decided not to use this particular product because we assessed the risk. We're going to send that input to the vendor. We're going to talk about that with NILA. Maybe it's even something that needs to be attended to on the regulatory or the legal level. We're going to take that input. We're going to, send that out so that we can get what we need. So that's a lot for a policy, but that is what it is designed to do. And with that, we've got, unless I'm wrong, 6 minutes of our time for some additional questions and commentary. And then, as was mentioned, we are going to also, once the recording is over, if anybody has a sensitive question that you didn't feel like putting in while we were recording, we will hold for another 15 minutes, hard stop at 11:45.
We do have some fascinating questions.
I have no doubt.
Yes. I'm going to take them out of order. As we look at designing AI policy for public and academic libraries, and as we consider humans, how much involvement from students and library patrons should we invest in the policy development process?
Ooh, that is a fantastic, fantastic question. So because all public libraries have to follow the open meetings law, so the meeting where the board would adopt any version of an AI policy, right, has to be an open meeting, which means the public has to be able to attend the meeting. It doesn't mean they have the right to participate, but one of the things I like to use policy, as you can clearly see, is also a chance to educate and to draw out conversation. And so if you are if you sense that your community is ripe for a discussion of this, taking all of these factors and doing a presentation at one board meeting and then saying we're all going to think about it and inviting the public to comment, that can in and of itself perform an educational function for your public. So thinking, the adopting the policy, even as a PR exercise and a public service, could be great. And I think that to the extent that you have the time and the energy to be able to do that, I think it could be very, very important on several levels, and also is an opportunity to hold your particular staff and your library out as a community resource when it comes to reliable sources of information. Yeah, very good point.
We had someone make a point in the chat, and with your permission, I will put a tiny change on the evaluation form. Tom Shaginaw, Tom said that it's very important that the date of the evaluation be on the form because this field is changing so quickly.
Okay, it's on 11 item 5, page 11 item 5, but it could be everywhere. And yes, that is an important point. And actually I would say also, and it's not on here, there should be something, so there should be something that says this product will be reevaluated, right? When should this product be reevaluated is another piece that comes from that point. So thank you. When reevaluated.
I should have known you'd already done it. What are your thoughts on handling it when you notice a patron using AI in an extremely high risk way? For instance, I had a patron that came to the desk to ask for a way to screenshot Google AI, and screenshotting and citing Google AI so that he could use the information given about traffic law from a Google summary for a traffic court case rather than going to the individual sources.
So this is another one where I'm going to stay in my lane because, right, my lawyer eyebrows just went up and I have thoughts and feelings. I do think this is one for you as librarians to discuss, because how you interface with a patron who is, using information the wrong, like is accessing untrustworthy information, whether it's in a book or wherever, that has ethical implications for you, because of the unbiased way that library services are supposed to be provided. But at the end of the day, if they are asking, if they're asking for your input and assistance, that is an invitation. But I'm going to leave that there and let your colleagues reply if anybody wants to be so kind as to share their thoughts on that, because this is the kind of thing that many of you have done deeper thinking on than I. Yes. So, punt.
Here's another one that's fascinating. Are there guidelines for evaluating job performance for annual reviews, promotion, and everyday routine work where access to AI tools could provide an advantage for getting work done? For example, an individual who has access to an AI tool might be able to be more efficient at sorting through spreadsheets than a person who is not assisted with AI. There's also a significant difference in trust in paid versions of AI versus free AI. So, access to premium versions can also create advantages. Can you advise where we can find guidelines for developing internal operation policy?
So I think it starts with, thank you, it's a great question. It starts with job descriptions, which of course should be evaluated and revised on an annual basis, ideally, usually around the time of employee evaluations. If typing on a typewriter is still a job duty or a skill in a job description, it might, it's time to update it. Same thing now with AI competencies. Not every job at a library or any type of library or cultural institution is going to require competency in AI. And you don't necessarily have to say AI, right? It can say competency with current technologies to perform essential duties. And then the essential duties are performing reports, et cetera, et cetera. So it starts with the job description. The job description then drives the evaluation. And I see Jen's back in because we're cruising to an end at 11:30. But that's what I had to say on that. That's a great question. Let's see. Yeah, it's 11:30. Look at that. Hey, Jen. Get it done.
Hey, Sorry to interrupt here, but I know everyone's expecting things to wrap up now. So please remember that a version of the template policy and links based on the changes that were discussed today will be up on the Ask the Lawyer page by September 20th. This will be sent to all of you through email, and you'll probably see announcements from your own regional council as well once these materials are available. An evaluation link will be shared in the chat, so please feel free to leave as much comments and feedback as you'd like. We love hearing from you. We will be assessing this feedback to make sure that any needs or comments expressed can be used to create more helpful professional development on this topic. And all of the content generated during this session will be also uploaded and shared, including things like the chat that some folks were worried about. So thank you all for being here today. This has been a really wonderful session and, so much to discuss. And yes, Cole and all of us at ESLN really appreciate all of the input you provided. It is really helping us to keep New York's libraries fearlessly focused on ethics and innovation and everything else that must be considered as we lead the way for the use of trustworthy AI, I should say. So we're now going to stop the recording and provide a little bit of time for any sensitive questions you might have. We're only going to be able to do this until 11:45. So please keep that in mind, but we're going to try to get through as much as we can.